Welcome to the next episode of the Austin Bar Association's Council of Firsts. I'm your host, Amanda Arriaga, First Latina Bar President. Today we talked to a trailblazer who has been the first in almost every post that she's been part of. We talked to Delia Garza, County Attorney of Travis County. She was the first Latina elected to the Austin City Council, first Latina Mayor Pro Tem, and now is the first Latina County Attorney. She's a graduate of Texas A&M University and Gonzaga School of Law. Between her undergraduate degree in law school, she became a firefighter in the Austin Fire Department. Delia Garza is a true public servant and specifically has served on almost every committee that improves the city of Austin, including serving as chair of the Regional Affordability Committee, vice chair of the Capital Metropolitan Transportation Authority, the Health and Human Services Committee, Austin Energy Oversight Committee, Public Safety Committee, and Mobility Committee. I am delighted to have with us today Delia Garza.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So one thing that I have learned while researching you is we went to A&M at the same time.
Okay.
You were a journalism major.
Uh-huh.
And then after being a journalism major, you decided to pivot and become a firefighter. Why did you make that choice?
I always knew that my career would be in public service. And I actually picked journalism because I couldn't decide what to pick at A&M. And I was flipping through the handbook, which I know dates me because I'm sure I wonder if there's paper handbooks anymore at colleges, but I'm sure everything's online. But I was flipping through the handbook. I knew it was going to be like some kind of communications, liberal arts degree. And there was the first line in the journalism said, many people pick journalism who want to go to law school because there's not like a pre-law track at A&M. And so that's what piqued my interest with that. I always felt like I was an advocate. And so I wanted to be, that's what I wanted to do as my career. When I was leaving A&M, I was looking at, I knew I wanted to live in Austin. I grew up in San Antonio. I wanted to live in Austin. And so I went to the City of Austin website and I started looking at jobs. And the very first banner said the fire department was hiring. My father was a firefighter. He served 36 years in the San Antonio Fire Department. And so he'd always encouraged my sisters and I to be firefighters. And he's a huge feminist, my father. And so I decided to apply to the Austin Fire Department because I knew it was a challenge. I was always proud to tell people what my father did for a living. I get bored easily, so I thought it'd be perfect for my personality. And that's why I chose that path for that time.
Well, you got bored easily, and beyond just your firefighter duties, You also were active in the union.
Yes.
And so is that part of what made you decide to leave firefighting and to go to law school?
Yes, it had a lot to do with it because as a union leader, which was also inspired by my father, he was a union leader in his fire department. In fact, every single one of our summer trips was also his union conference. So he used his union conference as, our summer trips. And he was a leader and he would talk to my sisters about, speaking up for yourself and advocating and how they supported a city council candidate in San Antonio because they were required to pay for their own gloves and pay for their uniforms and there were no safety protections for them. And they realized that if they put people in power that would speak for them, that they would get their, the city to pay for their gloves and their, all their safety and safety precautions. And so I joined the union pretty quickly after joining the Austin Fire Department, and it's lots of politics involved in union work. You have to negotiate with the city for your contract every year, and not every year, depending on the length of the contract. You negotiate with the city. It's one of the few departments. The EMS, fire, and police are the departments that get to negotiate with the city. I became a part of the bargaining committee and sat across the table from the city and negotiated contracts. There was big changes in the fire department. When I was in there, we got collective bargaining. The Austin Fire Department did not have collective bargaining, and that requires a petition, a referendum. And so I stood outside, CVS and asked people, will you support Austin firefighters, and ask for signatures, which is one of the most humbling things you can do, is ask for signatures because people are like, they don't want to be bothered. But as soon as you said you were a firefighter, they were open to listening. And so it did inspire my city council when I decided to run for city council, because my union president at the time was Mike Martinez, who left the fire department to run for city council. And I had worked on many political campaigns with my father when he was working for candidates through his union work. And then as a firefighter myself and union leader, I continued to work on local campaigns here in Austin. And so got to know a bunch of the political or the leadership in general of this community, and saw Mike be able to be successful at that as well. So that was a big inspiration for me.
And so you became a lawyer, and then your entire career stayed on that public service track.
Yeah.
Why is being a public servant so important to you?
Again, I go back to my parents. They're a big inspiration in my life. My mom was just very involved in everything in the community, PTA, anything to support me and my sisters, and constantly seeing role models who are out there participating, getting involved. You don't realize till you get older, or maybe till you're a parent yourself, that when someone asks for help, there's not always a lot of people raising their hand offering to help. And so just seeing my parents being those people, and then seeing my father's advocacy in his union, and I've said before, I was that annoying friend in the circle of friends who always thought they were right. I don't think that anymore. I've gotten older and more humble, but I was also the friend who stuck up when a friend was being bullied, and so I think I just naturally had this quality that wanting to speak up for people, and I didn't realize it till I was much older that's not common in a lot of people. That I don't want to say it's fearless, because it's I'm not always fearless, but I'm stubborn. I think I'm mostly more stubborn, and I'm more afraid to have regret than to care about failure. And so if I'm approaching something in my life that seems hard, I tell myself that I'd rather try it and fail than regret not trying it. And so realizing that was my character, I thought that that's what I was meant to do. That's the path I was supposed to be on, public service.
I mean, I think that's pretty fearless. There are a lot of times that you'll be in a room and people will say something that's just a little bit off. And most people will sit there and be like, well, there's probably had a bad day, probably didn't mean it.
Oh.
And someone is supposed to be the one. Yeah. I am also the loudmouth in every group that I'm in.
Yeah.
Someone should be the one to say, well, that's not right.
Yeah.
You can't say that.
Yeah.
We really shouldn't be okay with that. So
yeah.
I think your hashtag is fearless. We won't call you stubborn. I feel like that has a more negative connotation.
Yeah. Okay.
What do you think your legacy will be as county attorney?
Well, definitely, I'll always be the first Latina that ever was in this position. But, I think being an outsider is why this community elected me, because it was right around the when George Floyd was murdered. And I think, like many other communities, people wanted to see change in the criminal justice system. And so when you're an outsider, it's easier to make pretty significant changes, because you don't come in with, you don't already have the mindset, well, we've already tried that, or that's too hard, it's too heavy a lift. And as an outsider, it's kind of easier to implement these pretty big changes. And so some of the things we've done, our first shift of council, our first appearance, they've already started, the pilot shifts, but for many, many years, many in this community knew we needed to implement council at first appearance when somebody's arrested, and the first time they go before a judge, a magistrate, is such a critical time in the process. And in Travis County, they weren't represented. And, there were many predecessors that knew that it needed to happen, but it was an extremely heavy lift. And I didn't do that by myself, but I've been part of a group that's been meeting month after month, year after. I mean, we started meeting probably 3 years ago, talking about how to implement this. And so now people will start. We started with some test shifts, and now October 1, we're supposed to start at least one shift every single day, which will be tomorrow, of giving people counsel at first appearance. That's one of the things. There were diversion programs that people weren't able to use because the the rules were too strict. So like our pretrial diversion, DWI, somebody's worst mistake shouldn't be follow them the rest of their lives. Everybody makes mistakes, and for our caseload, the bulk of our cases are DWIs, assault, family violence type of cases. And so there were diversion programs in our office that were so strict and rigid that there was opportunity for more to be involved, but because there was these strict rules, more people couldn't be involved. So we've made that more flexible, and we have hundreds and hundreds of people being able to get the help that they need, whether that be counseling or being monitored, to make sure they're not drinking during this diversion period, getting them resources that they need, because many people drink because they're masking other issues in their lives. And so our goal is to get them the help that they need, get them out of the criminal justice system. As long as they follow a pretty strict process, then their case will be dismissed and we will approve early expungement. And so things like that, being more flexible, focusing on public safety is not just putting people in jail. Public safety is affordable housing. Public safety is mental health care. Public safety. So I think we've changed the narrative in the office about what public safety is. And so I hope that's part of the work that we've done. We've included, it's almost a bad word to say equity in Texas, but we believe equity is important, and we encourage our prosecutors to have an equitable lens on the decisions they make, because the prosecutor is, many will say, one of the most powerful people in that courtroom. They decide what the charges. They can offer a plea. It's a very powerful position, and I tell them we have to use that power so we've changed the framing of how our prosecutors think, and when people need to be held accountable, and they, and there is a real public safety issue, we will hold people accountable too. So I think we've just kind of changed the way we think about public safety in the office and implemented new programs that many thought were not available. One other thing I'll say quickly is early case review. Many other counties, their law enforcement calls the prosecutor, and they have prosecutors on duty 24/7, and they don't even make an arrest until the prosecutor approves it. We haven't gotten to that level yet, but we do have a whole new team of prosecutors reviewing cases. We call them our early case review team, and there's no blanket rejection. There never has been. It's just they look at every single case, like every other prosecutor in every other county across Texas does, and determines, makes a determination on whether we accept that case or not. And so we've also implemented that, and that was something that many said was impossible or too expensive. And we were able to start that within 3 months of my first administration.
It's interesting that you describe yourself as an outsider, because I would think that with everything that you had done for the city, you would clearly be considered the local leader, right? The local Latino lawyer. But maybe that's just everybody feels like an outsider when they first start something.
Yeah.
And it's a good perspective to have, because I would never have thought that about you. So I think it's helpful for people to know.
Yeah.
You have been here the whole time since law school, since you graduated law school.
Yeah.
And you still felt like an outsider coming to this new job.
Yeah.
And doing these new important programs.
But it was more specifically to the county. I was an outsider to the county.
Right.
Yeah.
So because you were the first Latina member of city council, mayor pro tem, and county attorney, do you think that is making it easier for other women and minorities to have the doors open for them too?
I certainly hope so. As I've said before, that I'm the first but not the last, and I think it's Sonia Sotomayor. I meant to look at it before I came so I could say it correctly, and then I got busy. She says, she loves when people doubt her, something to the effect of, she loves when people doubt her because it just gives her the motivation to prove them wrong. That's what pushes her, is to prove them wrong. It has not been an easy path. I appreciate the perspective that I have been a member of this community, but politics can be pretty brutal sometimes. And, in cases where there were people who fully supported me as the Latina, the brown girl representing a brown district. But then when I decided to run for county attorney at countywide, the same people who thought I was competent enough to do that other very important work didn't think I was competent enough to do this work. And so I feel like I've been constantly proving people wrong. And I hope that that makes the path easier for the Latinas coming behind me, that showing that we can do it and we are competent. And so I think Travis County has done well, like Latinas do well in countywide elections. And so I'm very grateful for that. Women do well in countywide elections here in Travis County, but I definitely hope all the challenges I dealt with will not be there for others coming up. But I'm here to help. I'm always, happy to sit down to coffee with anyone who reaches out and wants to have that conversation, because I know that nobody ever told me no when I would ask that. And I always appreciated that. When I was decided to run for city council, when I was deciding to run for this position and ask people, and not a single time was I told no. And I want to be able to do that for others too.
Were you celebrated as the first Latina for each of the 3 positions, or is that something that really happened in retrospect?
Celebrated like by the community?
Yeah.
Or I mean, it probably happened afterwards more than anything. The Latino community, when I became a council member, there was a lot of great, celebrations in that community. To be honest, I've never seen it really widespread celebration, but I don't, it's not why I do it. I don't do that for that reason. I actually didn't know when I think I learned I was already considering running for city council when I learned that there had never been a Latina. I knew there hadn't been a lot of Latino representation, period, but I really didn't know I would be the first. And then I hadn't really thought about it either when I was running for county attorney. I wanted to do that because I just thought it was a good fit for me and all the work I'd done on council for criminal justice reform. Yeah, I guess I don't do it for the recognition.
Of course not.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting. That's part of why we started this podcast.
Yeah.
Is I learned my first day as bar president that I would be the first Latina, and nobody really cared. And so I started looking at how many women, how many minorities, and the answer was so few.
Yeah.
Found out I'm the first Latina Austin Young Lawyers president. Nobody cared. We never talked about that.
Yeah.
But I think we're supposed to, not for us, but for everybody else that's coming up. Because since we did this, since we have been featuring important leaders who are from these underrepresented groups, I think it helps other people figure out like, oh, well, that door's open too. But I think it's interesting that nobody really cared.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's okay. Because we have our own internal self-worth.
Yeah.
But I think we're supposed to talk about it.
Yeah.
And why it's important to have that representation.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I definitely always notice it. In fact, I remember when you were introduced at a bar event, and I was like, oh, she's Latina. And then I looked up the history and saw that you were the first. And I think I walked up to you first.
You did at the gala.
Yes.
It was so nice.
How proud I was of you and maybe that's why you make the effort, because you don't get that otherwise, right? And so you want other people to know how important it is. But in the Latina community, I feel it in that community. But you're right; it probably should be celebrated more. And I appreciate all your efforts to do that and highlight us.
Yeah, well, that's why we wanted to feature you.
Yeah.
So you sort of answered this already, but do you think the legal community is doing better at being more diverse, equitable, and inclusive?
I do. I see what I've noticed in government work. There's a lot of diversity, and I see that more definitely. I never worked in the private legal world. I clerked at a firm my 2L year, and in fact, I was part of a program that was specifically put there to try to diversify some of the the law firms there in the Pacific Northwest in Spokane. And I remember having a conversation because I found out that I was getting paid a little more than the other summer clerks because I was part of this program of trying to recruit more minorities. And I went up to my managing attorney and I said, I didn't feel right about that. And I asked to be paid what everybody else was paid. And she was like, absolutely not. And she was like, you're going to get what, the program offers. And you should be okay with that. Like you need to be okay with that. And so I appreciated that. So I really don't know how the, private, I think they're doing better. I've seen the scorecards every now and then. I look through the scorecards, but I went to there was a Latinas, St. Mary's does this Latinas conference. And I think it was 2 years ago I went, and it was interesting. They showed the actual decline in Latina representation as a whole. It's like it blew my mind. It was such I don't want to say it because I'll say it wrong, but it was Latinas make up a very small percentage of lawyers throughout the country, which is kind of shocking to me, frankly, because I don't know. I have all sisters, and we're all very similar, and I feel like we have the perfect personalities for legal work. But I think it's, it's just the effect of you can't be what you don't see kind of thing. And when you don't see a lot of us doing the work, it's hard. But I know like UT has a minority women pursuing law, and our office works with them a lot. So I know that it's getting better. But the percentages are embarrassingly low, the number of Latinas and doing this work.
What's next for you?
I'm going to lunch. Just kidding.
Good.
I'm not going to lunch. It's in I bring lunch a lot. I'm still on my first term as a Travis County attorney. I don't have an opponent, so I just need to vote for myself, I think, and then I have one vote and I win. But so, I have 4 more years as the county attorney, and we've accomplished a lot, but there's still a lot of work to do. We want to open the first Family Justice Center for Travis County. We're working really hard towards that. I think that will happen next year. That's the goal, definitely. There's a lot of more work we want to do in the diversion space. We've been working with Life Anew, who does work in restorative justice, and we would love to widen our work with restorative justice because, there's a lot of studies that show that just sitting people down together and talking about conflict is much more productive, and people feel better about it when we do it that way. And so we have to start small because restorative justice is definitely not new, but trying to get people to understand why it's so important in this space is hard. It's hard. It's when you have victims and victims' families that you're talking to. One of the hardest parts of this job is talking to victims' families. And every murder case we've had, I talk to the family, and that's one of the hardest things. And we get those because the DA is sometimes conflicted out of their cases. And so we've had an intoxication manslaughter, and we've had other felony cases. And so, it's many times a very similar conversation. They're very angry, and so we have to start small with restorative justice and smaller types of more low-level crimes. But I think expanding our use of restorative justice is necessary. And there are so many resources we need towards mental health, and it's so sad that a prosecutor is talking about this because many people think, well, you're supposed to solve it. You're supposed to, this person has done something awful and bad, and you need to put them in jail for the rest of their lives, without understanding the dynamic and the challenges that so many in our community are facing. And it's just getting worse for people dealing with mental health after COVID. Social media has created all these mental health challenges. And so we're going to continue to see these problems. And so we're working on a diversion center. We've been working since my first year trying to get a diversion center, trying to get people connected to the resources that they need, because it shouldn't be a criminal justice system. I've said many times, when it becomes a criminal justice system, this person has been failed so many ways before us. And so really, I believe getting the state to prioritize these issues and fund more involuntary mental health services for people would have a huge impact on crime, frankly, in our community. But so there's a lot to do. So it's a long way to say I have 4 more years as a county attorney, and I'm enjoying the work. I'm enjoying the work that we're doing here, and as long as I can continue to have an impact, I'll stay in this position.
Well, thank you for everything that you have done for our city, our county, our community, everything that you're going to do in the next 4 years.
Yeah.
I appreciate you being here.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
We'll see y'all next time. Thank you.
Thank you.